Welcome back to Behind the Sawdust. This week has been really busy as we finish up the June issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. Normally the projects that will be featured are all completed well ahead of time so that the editing and the narrating and everything else can be done. But this time, everything's running behind schedule. One project video had to be scrapped altogether because of some problems with the footage. Another was delayed because of an equipment problem that may or may not have been my fault. All of this has really messed with the publishing schedule all week, and I've been running around like an angry monkey looking for someone to throw poo at. While you let that mental image sink in, I want to continue one of the storylines from our last episode, a behind-the-scenes look at the birth of a homemade woodworking machine. In our last edition of Behind the Sawdust, you witnessed the birth of a woodworking jig at our computer workstation. It was a beautiful moment, I'm sure, but the next step in a project's development occurs right here in the main workshop. There's a computer in this shop as well, right over in that far corner, which is next to the sanders, which I believe are positioned in just the right spot to shoot as much dust as possible directly onto the motherboard. If you don't know what a motherboard is, it's the part of the computer you don't want to get dusty. The purpose of that computer is so that a project SketchUp model can be displayed on monitors throughout the workshop. You may think it's overkill to have 4 monitors in a 400 square foot shop, but if I'm cutting a complex part over at the bandsaw, or I want to know where to bore a hole at the drill press, these monitors save me trips across the shop to get the measurements I inevitably forgot on my way to the tool. And I'm not really into those extra steps. I know what you're saying. Why not just lay your cuts out on the part before you take it to the tool? It's my process, and it works for me. There's only 2 of us here that live in the house connected to the shop, my wife and I, and we've got 15 screens, not counting smartphones. So we're single-handedly warming this planet with the glow of our monitors alone. A lot of what we make in this shop are homemade jigs on woodworking machines, and that means we use a lot of birch plywood. You should have seen us at Woodworking America last year. They had all of these booths manned by mostly fine hand tool makers. And right in the middle of all of it, we set up this big double-sided booth full of homemade power tools and jigs made out of plywood. We got quite a few eye rolls. Anyway, I buy my plywood from Home Depot because they'll cut it in half with their panel saw, which makes it way easier to handle. I rarely need a full-size piece, and while my saw will accommodate it, it's just a giant pain in the tuchus. Half sheets are also easier to store in a small shop. I slip mine into this rack back here until it's ready to be pulled out and cut down into smaller pieces. Any leftovers are stored right up above until needed. So it's really just a short trip from the rack to the table saw. Of course, with the monitor nearby to tell me where to make those cuts. See, handier than you thought, eh? On a jig project, I usually cut most of my parts out ahead of time, though I do leave some critical parts a bit oversized for custom fitting. As I cut the plywood parts, I mark their measurements on the edges so I can easily identify them as I begin to assemble the project. That's critical, especially with large projects that have many parts. Then, all of the parts are moved over to the bench area on that side of the shop, where the next phase of the development of a woodworking machine takes place. We'll save that for the next episode. For now, let's head over to the homemade workshop and see what Mustache Mike's got going on. Here in our homemade workshop, we put all of our shop-built jigs and machines to work, building projects for future issues of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. The last time we were here, this lathe stand was only half complete. Now it's finished and ready to start using for a series of turning videos we have coming up. Maybe Mustache Mike will fill us in on those.
Yeah, actually we're quite excited. We've got a lot of different videos in the works. Going to cover a wide range of subjects, from carbide tools to the Excelsior lathe. And then we'll even cover some of the kits that are out there, from turning pens to barbecue tools, pizza cutters. There's a lot of different kits available out there.
So kind of for the beginning to moderate wood turner.
Yeah, they're going to be set out in a tutorial type format where we teach both tools and techniques, so you'll be able to make projects for yourself or for gifts for others.
So what else have you been working on?
Well, I just finished a nice pine plant stand for Mrs. Mustache. It's going to be coming up in a current issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal, and we just finished a new wall covering. I think it's going to help us with our lighting when filming, and it just looks great too.
Sounds good. Well, let's head back to the other workshop for a cold one and to check out a cool tool. In our recent card scraper videos, which you'll find in the June issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal, you may have noticed a little portable bench that we were using to do the sharpening. This is made by a Swedish bench company, Joburgs. They call it their Smart Vise, and people asked about it, so I thought we would put it up against Mustache Mike's patented system of review that looks at quality, performance, and value. So let's start with quality. How well is the thing made?
That's kind of a difficult one because I initially thought one thing, but over time, I've actually changed my mind. Let me qualify that. Joburg is a premium brand. We're setting one of their full-size benches right now, and it's top of the line in every way. So when we got this portable bench top unit, I was a little bit surprised to see the top was made of MDF, not hardwood. You know, the vise is hardwood, the screw's heavy steel, the base is even a piece of Baltic birch plywood. But the MDF top just seemed, just a little out of place. But we've used the thing quite a little bit, even got it quite wet when we was using water stones for sharpening on the top. The veneer, it has held up well. When you look at it close, it's almost like a Formica type of material really over the MDF. So that's going to make it, of course, very tough. And the MDF does add some density. It's very heavy, which when it comes to vices is a good thing. And the MDF was necessary for them to keep the price down, as we're going to talk about a little bit in a minute. But I'm still going to have to give it 4 stars for quality, mostly because I would have preferred a hardwood top.
All right, well, what about performance? Does it do what it's supposed to do?
Well, actually, it is really intended to be a portable vise. If you don't have a vise on your workbench, or if you want to take one with you, you can clamp this down to any stable work surface, and what do you got? A high quality vise that's ready to go. I think woodworkers will really like this, but also anyone who wants some of the features of a traditional woodworking bench, like dog holes for holding work pieces down flat. The vise itself is very solidly built. It's good, strong steel, so even if you get a little rough with it, it's not going to break. And my only complaint is that there isn't much room between the top and the base to get a clamp in there when you want to secure it down to the bench. In fact, some of the larger clamps won't work with it. But I guess it's really not a real big issue, so I'm going to just knock off a half a star for it. 4.5 stars for performance.
Okay, well, finally we have value. Is it worth the price?
Well, Joburg tools are high quality, and with any high quality tool, you're going to pay for the luxury. This here Smart Vise runs about $145. Imagine most of that cost is in the steel hardware. And there is a big difference, though, between cast steel, like you'll find on the low-end vices, and the machine steel that's in these. And I know Joburg's full-size vices, what do they start at? $250 just for the hardware. So I'm not surprised that this smaller unit is $145. Overall, again, it's very convenient to use. I love the portability, and it works just as it should, and it's durable. So I'm going to give it 4.5 stars for overall value. Again, just because I would have preferred a solid top, especially in this price range.
So that means that the Joburg Smart Vise gets 4 1/3 out of 5 stars, a solid rating. It's also worth noting that the Smart Vise is on sale this month at all the woodworking retailers, and they're giving the miter box made out of Baltic birch with the purchase of the Smart Vise. I'll put a link in the show notes below if you want to look at that closer. That about wraps things up for this edition of Behind the Sawdust. Come back next week to see more of what goes on behind the scenes at Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. And don't forget to visit our sponsors' websites, even if it's just for a quick look. When you support them, you're supporting us, and that's how we can make all of this woodworking infotainment free to you. You'll find links in the notes below the video. Then you can sit back and have yourself a cold one, because you've earned it, my friend.